Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cisco Optics Podcast, where we talk about pluggable optics for networks. Single-mode fiber transformed telecommunications in the 1970s and 1980s by raising the ceiling for communication bandwidth over transoceanic distances. It took years of R&D to get there, though. Remember, we're sending light through tens of kilometers of glass without regeneration. I mean, imagine how pure the glass of an 80-kilometer thick window needs to be in order to see through it. This is episode 45, and we continue our conversation with Roisin McCool, expert in fiber networks for telecommunications and scientific instrumentation at Corning Optical Communications. She explains the impact of geography on fiber networks. Roisin McCool is a senior market and technology development manager for Corning Optical Fiber and Cable, specializing in single-mode fiber and access networks. She provides technical and market insight for Corning's global fiber and cable product line management teams. Roisin has 30 years of experience in engineering and optical communications systems and subsystems, including many years designing networks for advanced radio telescopes. Roisin has held project management and coordination lead roles in diverse teams throughout her career. Roisin is the acting chair of the Women in Fiber Committee for the FTTH Council Europe and is the winner of the Corning Optical Communications You Make a Difference Award 2022 for her leadership of diversity initiatives in Corning. Roisin holds a master's degree in electrical and electronic engineering from the University of Nottingham, United Kingdom, and is a chartered member of the Institute of Engineering and Technology. And now join me as I talk with Roisin McCool.
Local networks to mobile networks to access networks. Those networks are impacting on people's lives right across the world, everybody's life. And if you think about the recent pandemic, they were absolutely necessary for us to engage, so that they really had an impact in that way.
So do you find, are there differences, are there differences in preferences around the world that translate into differences in requirements on your product, which would lead you to have to straddle different sets of requirements for different customer bases?
So I'm a bit of a geographic determinist on this question, in the sense that I think geography determines an awful lot of what we do, and that networks are inherently geographic structures, right?
Okay.
So they follow geography. So for instance, if you look at networks in Europe where the population densities tend to be very high, and of course China where they're even higher, that's a different scenario than, say, somewhere like the US, where there's so much more space, where people are more spread out. And so the functional requirements of, let's say, products that go into high-rise blocks in China or EMEA may be quite different to the needs of big villas that are kind of really spread out that you might see in some Middle Eastern locations or in the US. So that those things have an impact. And of course, the other thing is where you have, where you've got places like the US, like places in Africa, where you have pockets of very high population density with very little in between. Those are also, that's also a difference when you compare that to, say, Europe.
Okay, so what are some examples of how these density variations would lead to differences in the properties of the fiber? The product is basically the fiber, right? Or
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So in terms of the properties of in fiber, one example might be that if you're in a very highly dense populated area where connectivity is something that one has to consider very carefully, then so the bend resilience of the fiber might be really, really critical, right?
Mm.
Because if you bend a fiber, then there is potential for macro bend. So, sure, we'll get into this when we talk about the properties of fibers, but um, in summary, you can bend a fiber to its minimum bend radius, and beyond that, the light starts to leak out of the fiber. So, in certain circumstances, it's possible to really have high loss as a result of maybe an unintentional bend in a connection.
And how much bending are we
And
talking
of
about
course,
here? Like, what's for people who aren't familiar with handling fiber?
so this has recently become so important that the ITU, who's the standard body for fibers, they created a standard around this question, which is the G657 standard.
Okay.
So a normal fiber, you can bend it to 30 millimeter radius.
Okay.
So that's the minimum bend radius. But then there are a category of fibers called G657 fibers where you can bend it on tighter radius. So the A1 fiber, which is like the Corning Ultra fiber, you can bend that to 10 millimeter radius. And the bend loss is then guaranteed by that standard.
Okay.
And then there's even tighter bends. So there is a category of fibers called A2 fibers where you can bend it to 7.5 millimeters. And then one even beyond that, which is 5 millimeters, which is almost like copper-like in its performance. And that's a B3 category fiber. So for instance, that would be like a Corning ZBL fiber.
So, okay, so we go from 30 millimeters, which would be like, you'd be like wrapping it around, I don't know, like a soda can maybe,
Yeah, yeah.
down to 5 millimeters, half a centimeter. So then it's like wrapping it around like a pen or something.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
that's exactly right. And so the 30 millimeters is standard single mode fiber. So your bog standard G652D fiber. And then these G657 category fibers just allow you to do more. And often what you'll see those ZBL type fibers where you can really bend it round a pen. They might be inside a premises where it's an environment that's entirely uncontrolled. It's probably got, a family living in this house and they want to move the fiber because they want to move the TV or something
Oh,
like
okay.
that, and they bend it and they move it wherever they want. Well, of course, that's not going to be an environment that a standard single mode fiber is going to like very
Right.
much,
Because the
right?
general public's not going to know that there's a 30 millimeter minimum bend radius. They just see a cable and they just want to watch
Yeah,
their TV,
yeah,
right? So,
yeah. Exactly. And that'll cause loss, you see, if in those environments, if that was a standard single mode fiber and you were inside a home and some guy has redecorated and moved the TV and is just, bending the fiber around the door frame or something like that,
okay.
that would create loss. But these category G657 fibers, they can accommodate that kind of environment.
Okay. What would be a trade-off? Like, why wouldn't we make every fiber with that extreme bend radius? What's the performance trade-off?
Well, the bend, those kind of, if you like, tighter bend radiuses require profile designs that are more complex than potentially a standard single mode fiber of a G652 category.
By profile,
Um,
do you mean excuse me, by profile do you mean the the cross-sectional index structure?
Yeah, so the index of refraction on both the core and the cladding of the fiber. So a fiber has basically two parts. There's a core and there's a cladding, and the difference in the index of refraction on those two fibers is what guides the light within the fiber. And fiber designers can play with those profiles. So you can have a step index fiber where the difference between the refractive indexes is just sort of a straight step line. Or there is graded index fiber where that refractive index profile is graduated radially from the core. Now, of course, the more complex the profile design, the more expensive it is to make.
So it's not necessarily just a simple step index. There could be graded index. Could it be a combination? Could it be multiple steps?
Yeah, and that profile design is kind of the secret sauce of the fiber manufacturers. You know, that's how we create our products and how we create differences in the product.
Okay, so back to geography. That was the second part of my conversation with Roisin McCool. Next time, we'll get into optical amplifiers and optical nonlinearity. Hey, we have a new website. It's optics.podcastpage.io. That's optics.podcastpage.io. You can either listen there or use the same podcast platform you've been using all along. Please subscribe. Better yet, leave a review, especially if you use Apple Podcasts. Remember, we're part of the Cisco Podcast Network, where you can find other great Cisco podcasts too. We also have educational videos on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com and search on Cisco Optics. Thank you for listening. This is Pat Chow, Product Manager at Cisco Optics. The next episode is part 3 of my conversation with Roisin McCool. Until next time.